In the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, one star shone brighter than any other. Yammie Lam, a woman so beautiful they said she was unrivaled. She had fame, talent, and the adoration of millions. Yet, within a few short years, she would lose everything: her career, her fortune, and her mind, before dying alone in a small apartment. What happened to her? The answer involves a dark story of personal tragedy, mental anguish, and shocking allegations against some of the most powerful men in the industry. For more deep dives into incredible true stories, be sure to subscribe to our channel. In the vibrant, neon-soaked world of 1980s Hong Kong, the entertainment industry was a star-making machine, and its most effective engine was the television station TVB. Each year, its acting academy would produce a new class of hopefuls, young men and women dreaming of having their faces beamed into millions of homes. The class of 1983 was particularly noteworthy. Among the ambitious students was a young Karina Lau, destined for greatness herself. But there was another, a woman whose luminous beauty was so striking, it seemed almost otherworldly. Her name was Yammie Lam Kit Ying. From the very beginning, it was clear she was different. It wasn't just her perfectly symmetrical features or the expressive depth in her dark eyes. It was a natural, unteachable charisma that made the camera fall in love with her. While others struggled to find their footing, Lam possessed an innate grace and a raw acting talent that made her an immediate standout. The instructors and producers saw it, her classmates saw it, and soon all of Hong Kong would see it too. Her ascent was not just fast, it was meteoric. TVB wasted no time in casting her, and she quickly became a fixture in the popular costume dramas and modern serials of the era. With each role, her fame grew exponentially. She was the fresh face everyone was talking about, the starlet who seemed destined to rule the decade. It was during this initial, explosive period of her career that she earned a nickname that would define her status: the unrivaled beauty of Mount Wu Tai. In the local slang of the time, Mount Wu Tai was a clever reference to the 5 major television and radio stations that dominated Hong Kong's media landscape. To call her the most beautiful on that entire mountain was to say she was, without question, the most stunning woman on television. It was not just a compliment, it was a coronation. She was no longer just a promising actress. She was an icon, the standard against which others were measured. Her image was everywhere, on magazine covers, billboards, and the television screens that glowed in every home. While her beauty opened doors, it was her talent that secured her place at the top. This was never more evident than in 1989 with the release of the TVB drama Looking Back in Anger. The series was a cultural phenomenon, a sprawling epic of love, betrayal, and family tragedy that captivated the entire city. It shattered viewership records and became one of the most definitive television dramas in Hong Kong history. In it, Lam played a pivotal, complex character, delivering a performance that was both heartbreaking and powerful. She proved she was more than just a pretty face. She was a formidable actress, capable of conveying immense emotional depth. The success of Looking Back in Anger cemented her status as a top-tier dramatic actress and a household name. She had reached the pinnacle of television stardom, a beloved figure who could guarantee a show's success simply by being in it. The natural next step for a star of her magnitude was the silver screen. The Hong Kong film industry was in its golden age, a creative and commercial powerhouse producing everything from high-octane action films to sweeping historical dramas. For Lam, the transition from television to film was a seamless one. She brought with her an established fan base and the undeniable star power that filmmakers craved. She took on roles that challenged her, appearing in the 1993 fantasy film The Bride with White Hair 2, holding her own alongside superstars like Brigitte Lin and Leslie Chung. She was proving her versatility, demonstrating that her appeal was just as potent in a dark, atmospheric cinema as it was in a brightly lit television studio. Each film role was a step higher, a move closer to the legendary status that seemed to be her destiny. Then came the role that would make her immortal in the world of Hong Kong cinema. In 1995, she was cast in Stephen Chow's two-part fantasy epic, A Chinese Odyssey. The films were a wild, postmodern take on the classic novel Journey to the West, blending slapstick comedy, breathtaking action, poignant romance, and philosophical musings. In this chaotic and brilliant cinematic universe, Lam played the dual role of the Spider-Woman and Xiao Qing. Her performance was a masterclass in complexity. She was at once seductive, dangerous, and tragically vulnerable. She navigated the film's dizzying tonal shifts with effortless skill, creating a character that was both terrifying and deeply sympathetic. The films were a massive success, and over time, they have become revered cult classics, beloved for their creativity and emotional resonance. Lam's portrayal of the Spider-Woman is one of the most memorable in the entire series, an iconic performance that is forever etched in the collective memory of a generation of moviegoers. At this moment, Yammie Lam had it all. She was the queen of television and a bona fide movie star, a celebrated talent at the absolute zenith of her career, with a future that appeared as bright and limitless as her own dazzling smile. The brilliant light that surrounded Yammie Lam in the mid-1990s was so intense that no one could see the cracks beginning to form beneath the surface. For a star at the zenith, the only way to go is down. And for Lam, the descent was terrifyingly swift and brutally steep. The universe, which had once conspired to give her everything, began to take it all away with a cruel and relentless efficiency. The unraveling started not in the glare of a studio light or on a movie set, but in the quiet, private realm of her family. First her father died, and then, not long after, her mother followed. For Lam, who was known to be deeply attached to her parents, these successive losses were a catastrophic blow. The foundation of her world crumbled, leaving her unmoored in a sea of grief. The radiant smile that had captivated millions began to falter, replaced by a profound sadness that even the most glamorous of photo shoots could no longer conceal. It was the first sign that the celebrated beauty of Mount Wutai was, beneath it all, achingly human and tragically vulnerable. The blows kept coming. She was involved in a serious car accident in late 1998, an event that left her with physical injuries to her hands and neck and likely exacerbated her growing emotional distress. The incident was more than just a physical setback. It was another piece of evidence for the tabloids that Lam's life was spinning out of control. Whispers about her increasingly erratic behavior began to circulate through the industry. Relationships soured, and professional commitments were sometimes missed. The industry that had built her up began to see her not as a superstar, but as a liability. The narrative started to shift. She was no longer just the beautiful, talented actress. She was becoming known as difficult, troubled, and unpredictable. Each misfortune, whether a personal loss or a public mishap, added another layer to this emerging persona, creating a downward spiral that seemed impossible to escape. But the most devastating trauma, the one that would later be presented as the dark heart of her suffering, was a secret she kept locked away for years. According to the story she would eventually tell, it was during this period of vulnerability in the late 1990s that she was violated by two of the most powerful men in the entertainment industry. She alleged that during a film shoot in Singapore, a prominent actor and industry heavyweight, a man she looked up to, forced himself upon her. The assault, she claimed, left her in a state of shock and deep psychological pain. She felt betrayed and powerless, silenced by the immense influence of her attacker. The event was not an isolated one. She would later name another legendary figure in the film world in connection with a separate assault. These alleged violations were not just attacks on her body. They were attacks on her spirit, a poisoning of the very industry that she had once loved and trusted. The trauma of these events festered within her, a silent wound that would dictate the course of the rest of her life. The public could not see this hidden wound, but they could see its symptoms. The Yammie Lam of the early 2000s was a shadow of her former self. The once poised star became a frequent subject of lurid tabloid stories. Paparazzi followed her relentlessly, capturing her at her most vulnerable moments. Photographs of her looking disheveled, smoking on the street with a vacant expression, or shouting in public became front-page fodder. The media, which had once praised her beauty, now mocked her appearance. They labeled her a madwoman, a fallen angel, a cautionary tale. Every public display of distress was interpreted not as a cry for help from a person in immense pain, but as a spectacle for public consumption. The city that had once adored her now watched her breakdown, with a mixture of pity and morbid fascination, turning her personal tragedy into a form of cruel, ongoing entertainment. As her public image disintegrated, her career completely evaporated. The film roles and television offers that were once a constant stream dried up entirely. Producers and directors, wary of her reputation for being unreliable and fearing the negative press that seemed to follow her, turned their backs on her. The same industry that had once clamored for her presence now ostracized her completely. She was cast out, left to navigate her profound mental health struggles without the structure, purpose, or financial security of the career that had defined her entire adult life. The fall from grace was absolute. In less than a decade, she went from being one of the most sought-after actresses in Asia to being completely unemployable, a ghost haunting the edges of the industry she had helped build. The financial consequences were just as devastating. Without an income, the fortune she had amassed during her peak years quickly dwindled, eaten away by daily expenses and a lack of management. She made poor investments and was reportedly too generous with her money when she had it. Eventually, the money ran out. In 2006, the final public humiliation arrived when Yammie Lam, the unrivaled beauty, was officially declared bankrupt by the Hong Kong courts. The star who once graced glamorous magazine covers was now forced to rely on a small monthly government stipend to survive. Her life became a painful contrast, the lingering memory of mansions and movie sets against the stark reality of lining up for social assistance. It was the complete dismantling of a life, a fall so total and so public that it seemed almost surreal. The woman who had embodied glamour and success for millions was now a symbol of ruin, a stark and tragic figure wandering the streets of the city that had once been her kingdom. The final chapter of Yammie Lam's life was lived in the quiet, anonymous corridors of a public housing estate in Stanley, a coastal town far from the dazzling city center she once commanded. The glamour of her past was a distant, almost unimaginable memory, replaced by the stark simplicity of a small, government-subsidized apartment. She lived a solitary existence, a recluse by necessity, seeking refuge from a world that had taken everything from her. Yet, she was never truly allowed her peace. Her tragedy had become so ingrained in the public consciousness that she was a living landmark of misfortune. Even in her seclusion, the ghost of her former fame lingered. Tabloid reporters would occasionally track her down, snapping intrusive photos of a middle-aged woman with prematurely gray hair and a haunted look in her eyes, a stark and cruel contrast to the vibrant beauty she had once been. For a small fee, neighbors would offer reporters tidbits about her quiet life. She was a ghost story the city refused to let go of, a constant reminder of the brutal cost of fame. She shuffled through her days largely alone, sometimes seen at the local church, which offered her a degree of solace and community. There were moments of clarity and seeming contentment, but they were always reported through the lens of her downfall. The public saw her not as a survivor navigating immense trauma, but as a permanent victim, a fallen star whose every move was a postscript to her own tragedy. The world had heard the stories of her erratic behavior, her financial ruin, and her mental health struggles. But for nearly 2 decades, the central question of why remained a matter of speculation. The real reason, the dark secret she held onto, was a weight too heavy to carry alone forever. In 2013, she finally decided to unburden herself, sitting down for a video interview with a journalist and speaking the unspeakable. She recounted, in a voice that was at times faint and broken, the story of being sexually assaulted by two powerful men in the entertainment industry. The interview was a bombshell, but one with a muffled explosion. When it was released, the names of her alleged attackers were censored, leaving the public to guess and speculate. For 5 years, the censored interview was the definitive version of her story, a harrowing account with a frustrating void at its center. Then, in January 2018, that void was filled with thunderous force. An uncensored version of the video suddenly appeared online, spreading like wildfire across social media. This time, there were no beeps, no obscured names. The world heard Yammie Lam clearly identify her alleged assailants. One was the long-deceased actor Alan Tang. The other was Eric Tsang, a man who was not just a famous actor, but one of the most powerful, influential, and well-connected figures in the entire Hong Kong entertainment industry. The revelation was stunning. It recontextualized her entire life story, transforming 2 decades of what was seen as madness into what could now be understood as profound, untreated trauma. The public outcry was immediate and immense. A generation that had grown up watching her films and then witnessing her tragic decline was filled with a collective, furious rage. Her story became a focal point for long-simmering frustrations about power, misogyny, and abuse within the industry. The accused, Eric Tsang, was swift to respond. He held a press conference, standing before a wall of cameras and microphones to vehemently deny the allegations. He claimed the video was doctored, a malicious fabrication designed to destroy his reputation. He was flanked by supporters and projected an image of indignant innocence. His denial drew a clear line in the sand. For his defenders and industry colleagues, he was the victim of a vicious, unsubstantiated rumor. But for a vast and vocal segment of the public, his denial rang hollow. They saw a powerful man using his influence to discredit a vulnerable woman who no longer had the strength to fight back. The court of public opinion became a battleground, and Yammie Lam, absent from the debate, became a symbol for the Me Too movement as it began to find its voice in Asia. Her past suffering was now present-day evidence in a trial with no courtroom. Just as the world was once again consumed by her story, it came to its final, heartbreaking end. On November 3rd, 2018, police were called to her apartment after a friend could not reach her. They broke down the door and found her body. She had been dead for several days. Yammie Lam died at the age of 55, alone, in the small apartment that had been her final refuge. The news of her death sent a profound shockwave of grief and anger across Hong Kong and beyond. There was an immense outpouring of sorrow for the brilliant star whose light had been so cruelly extinguished, and a renewed fury that she had died without ever receiving justice or peace. Her lonely death felt like the final, tragic indictment of an industry and a society that had failed her at every turn. Her funeral was a public spectacle, attended by fans and a few of her former co-stars, a belated tribute to a life that had ended in quiet obscurity. In death, Yammie Lam's voice became more powerful than it had been in her final years of life. Her story is no longer just about a fallen actress. It is a dark and cautionary tale about the abuse of power and the silencing of victims. It has cast a permanent shadow over the golden age of Hong Kong cinema, forcing a difficult reckoning with the toxic culture that can thrive behind the scenes of glamour and fame. The allegations against the men she named were never tested in a court of law, and without her testimony, they likely never will be. Yet, for many, her words in that final, uncensored interview served as her definitive truth. Her legacy is one of unresolved questions and profound sadness. She is remembered as the unrivaled beauty, a brilliant talent who shone brightly before being consumed by an unimaginable darkness. Her life was a tragedy in 3 acts, and though the final curtain has fallen, her story continues to echo, a haunting and powerful plea for empathy in a world that had shown her so little. Yammie Lam's story serves as a haunting cautionary tale. It's a tragic exploration of the fragility of fame, the cruelty of the tabloid machine, and the dark secrets the entertainment industry can hide. While the legal truth of her allegations may never be proven, her death ignited a firestorm, forcing a difficult conversation about power, abuse, and the systems that fail victims. Her life ended in silence, but her story now echoes louder than ever. What are your thoughts on her legacy? Let us know in the comments and subscribe for more important stories that deserve to be told.